Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Katarina. Today's video is going to be my eyeshadow palette wishlist video. So for 2021 I am on a low buy and I do have really different rules for different makeup categories. Some categories are replacements only, on some categories I am on a complete no buy, but then there are several categories where I will allow myself a limited amount of purchases. So eyeshadow palettes I'm allowing myself to purchase for this year. To be honest, I don't need any more eyeshadow palettes, but I do want to buy them. So this way I'm allowing myself to purchase some, but because I'm limiting the amount what I can buy, I really need to consider the palettes that I'm purchasing. Most likely, most of my eyeshadow palettes that I am going to purchase are some of these palettes. And one thing I will say is that if I want to, I can use a palette purchase to buy singles from an indie brand. I don't have any specific number, but there is actually one brand that I really want to try singles from, and they are Cosmetics. Of course, there are a lot of indie brands with beautiful singles, but I almost feel sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming, so I think Cosmetics is a brand I want to start from if I'm going to pick up singles from indie brands, because they do have so beautiful shades, they do have gorgeous neutrals and also some kind of like wearable colorful shades. If I'm going to buy singles from an indie brand, it's going to be Cosmetics, but there are also a bunch of palettes on my wishlist. Let's get to this wishlist. I do have here 8 different palettes, or actually 9, but from one brand I do have 2 options and I don't know which one I would buy, but I do have here 8 different brands. So the first palette that has been on my wishlist for a really long time is the Audens Couture Supreme Nude palette. This palette is so beautiful. I absolutely do love this color story. This is a neutral palette, but it's kind of like grungy yet still glam neutral palette, and I have wanted to get this palette since I saw it the first time somewhere in 2019. That being said, I don't think I'm going to purchase this palette this year unless it looks like this is getting discontinued, which I hope they will not discontinue this, and I don't think so, because this is their neutral palette and this is something they are really proud of, so I don't see why they would get rid of this palette, but if they would, then I would buy this year. I am on a highlighter no buy for this year, and the only place where I can really get Audens Couture products is their official website. They do have some products on Beauty Bay, but not much, and I do think they are probably getting discontinued from Beauty Bay because yeah, there's such a few products available there. If I want to get something from them, I need to buy from the brand website, and I also do want to get one of their highlighters. But since I am on a highlighter no buy, I don't think I'm going to make a purchase for them this year, so that's probably going to be in the beginning of 2022. So yes, I'm sometimes someone who plans my purchases like really far away, but I don't want to place more than one order to their website. So when I do, I want to pick up this palette, the highlighter that I want, and also a couple of their lip products. But yeah, this palette totally is something that I will be adding to my collection. Alright, let's move on. I do have one palette on my wishlist from BH Cosmetics, and if you have been watching my videos, you probably know that BH Cosmetics is one of my favorite brands when it comes to eyeshadows. They are affordable, they are really good quality, and compared to Colourpop, they are way more easy for me to get. I can actually buy them from Europe. I cannot buy them from stores, but I can order within Europe so that I don't need to pay taxes, and that of course makes me rather buy from BH Cosmetics than from Colourpop. But also they do have really beautiful palettes, and I am kind of like collecting their travel palettes. I do have 3 of the palettes. I don't want to buy all of them because there are some color stories that I'm not that much into, and I'm not that kind of makeup collector who would buy things just to have a full collection of something, but there is one palette from the travel series that I would still love to add into my collection, and this is their Hanging in Hawaii palette. So this palette is like a really soft, warm, neutral palette with some pop of pink. Nothing groundbreaking, but I do really like this color story. That being said, I also do think this palette is not something I would buy this year, because I feel this year I want to use, if not all, at least most of my 4 palette purchases to buy from brands that I have not tried before. So because of that, I don't really think I need to get this palette right now, but this totally is the next palette from the travel series that I would add to my collection. Next, there is one eyeshadow palette from e.l.f. that is kinda on my wish list. Again, I don't think I would buy this palette this year, because I would rather buy from brands that I have not tried previously, but their new classics palette is on my wish list. I really did love the e.l.f. Opposites Attract eyeshadow palette, but I do have that palette right now, and I don't really feel a need to add another e.l.f. palette to my collection right now, but I will say that this palette looks beautiful. This is something I know I would get a ton use out of, but maybe this year is not going to be the year that I would buy something like this. And next we do have a palette that I'm really considering for this year. So this palette comes from Clarity Cosmetics, and Clarity Cosmetics is cruelty-free, vegan-friendly and black-owned indie brand from US. And they do have so beautiful palettes, and the palette that I want from them is their I Love Coffee palette. And I know this palette is boring for so many of you, but for me this is a stunning palette. Like, I love everything about this palette. First of all, for me this would be a complete palette. I wouldn't need to reach for anything else when I would create looks, and this looks like a really wearable everyday palette, but also something where I could get really glam looks from. And also, I do love coffee. Like, I live in Finland, and Finns, I have heard, drink the most coffee in the world. So yeah, I really do love coffee. Like, I need 2 cups coffee in the morning just to get myself awake. That's part of my morning routine. I cannot start my day without my coffee. So, you know, I do think this would be such a great palette for me because of that. But let's be real, I don't need this palette, so yeah, I'm not quite sure. The thing with Clarity is that they don't have their palettes available for a really long time. Like, they are not permanent in a way that most brands' palettes are. They will discontinue their palettes after a while, so most likely if I want to get this palette I would need to get this year. So I'm kinda on the hence about this, because I know I would love this palette, and I know I probably wouldn't get this palette later if I skipped it this year, but at the same time I know very well that I don't need this palette into my collection, but I still want it. Then let's talk about the palette that is most likely going to be my first palette purchase for 2021. So this is the Lime Crime Venus XL2 eyeshadow palette. This palette has been on my wish list probably for 2 years already. Like, when I saw this palette for the first time, I was really curious about this because I absolutely love this color story. And then I heard Emily Noel recommending this one in a video where I think she was talking about spring palettes, and I totally agree that this is a really springy palette. I absolutely love this because this is a soft palette that is a beautiful combination of soft colors and neutrals. So in this palette there are some pinky tones, there are some cream tones, and also some neutrals. And I want to add this palette into my collection. It has been on my wish list for so long. From palettes that Lime Crime has, this one for sure is the one that I want to get, and I am going to get it for this spring, so I'm probably going to buy it in a month or 2. Then let's talk about another brand I have not tried, but I am so curious about them. So this is Lunar Beauty. So this is Manny MUA's brand. I think the palette that I would get from Manny MUA's brand is their Moonspell eyeshadow palette. I really do love everything about this palette. So this is a witch themed palette. I really do love the packaging and the theme, but also I do like the colors. So there is a purple row, a neutral row, and then a more green sort of row. I will say that I don't wear purple eyeshadow too often, but I do think that this color story is really unique and beautiful, and this, because there are neutrals, this makes the purples a little bit easier for me to wear them. So yeah, this palette I think I would buy from Lunar Beauty, but also I do think their Create Goddess palette is beautiful. That is just probably kind of like a little bit too safe palette. Like, I think this Moonspell palette is more fun, but the Create Goddess one is something I know I would get ton use out of, but I still want this Moonspell palette. And also the new Eternal Eclipse palette looks so beautiful. It's kind of like that neutral, beautiful color story with some pops of color, but I still think the Moonspell palette would be the first palette from Lunar Beauty that I do want to try. As I said in the beginning of the video, there is one brand that I do want to try, but I'm not exactly sure which palette from them I want to try, and that brand is Nabla. So there is two palettes from Nabla that are on my wish list. And the first one is their Secret palette. So this one is a little bit older palette, and I really do love this color story. So it is a combination of some pink tones, some neutrals, and then some greens and kind of like teal shades. And this looks so beautiful. And I do think this is a palette that, even though it has a lot of color, because it has those neutrals to balance it, I can see myself creating so many beautiful looks from this palette. So yeah, this would totally be something unique into my collection. The only thing I'm not so sure about are the deeper teals. I'm typically not that much into shades like that, but another palette from them that is really tempting me is their new Side by Side Nude eyeshadow palette. This is a really safe palette. Some of you might call it boring. It is a neutral palette, but what I really love in this palette is that you can create a look that is like truly neutral. You can create cool toned look, and you can create a warm toned look from it. So I do think this is a really versatile palette. I don't really have anything quite like this in my collection, and if I could only have one eyeshadow palette in my collection, I would want to have something like this. I really don't know which one I would pick. Probably the Secret palette would be a smarter choice, and it actually has been on my wishlist for a longer time, but the Side by Side palette is on my wishlist for now, and we'll see if it hangs there for a longer time, so maybe then next year I would consider this one. And then there is one more eyeshadow palette that is on my wishlist, and this one comes from Audens Eye. So Audens Eye is a Swedish indie brand, and I really do love their aesthetic and the inspiration behind the brand. So this brand is really heavily based on Nordic mythology, and I'm really much into that kind of stuff. I really do love all of their themes, and the palette from them that I would want to add into my collection is their Elva eyeshadow palette. It is a warm palette that has some neutrals, but it has some kind of like purpley and reddish tones and a couple of beautiful yellows. So this is again palette that is mainly neutral, but it's fun, and there are some pops of color that would be easy to use. This is a beautiful palette that I'm really considering, and you don't hear often about brands, especially indie brands that come from Nordic countries or Scandinavia, so I am really excited about this brand, and yeah, I do want to add this palette into my collection. Okay, so those are all of the palettes that are on my wish list right now. It's going to be difficult to pick between all of these beautiful palettes, which ones I will get this year. I don't know, we'll see, but most likely at least most of my palette purchases this year are going to be from this wishlist. But that is everything for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if there are any palettes on your wishlist. See you on my next one. Bye bye!